Good morning to you, Jenny. Today we're talking some Darden restaurants.
This is a name that gets a lot of flack on social media because of its largest brand, which is Olive Garden. But, just for starters, I have to say there are two kinds of people in this world, the people that admit they like Olive Garden and people who are liars. Because something about an unlimited breadstick basket really sells. And I mean, unlimited carbs do pretty well. And I'm not alone in this thinking. I think that Olive Garden near Times Square in New York is one of the highest grossing restaurants in the country. So I'm not alone in this sentiment. But in addition to Olive Garden, this brand also has Longhorn Steakhouse, Fine Dining Capital, which includes Capital Grill, Eddie V's Prime Seafood, and Wild Fish Seafood Grill. So a bunch of different brands there. But as with any name in restaurants right now, there is good news and there is bad news. So the bad news is that almost a month into fiscal year 2021, comps are down all across the board, about a third from the same year last year. So that's obviously not great. But then the good news is that a recovery is being made. So if you break down comps by brands, Olive Garden saw in the week ending April 12th, their comps were down about 53%. And the week ending June 21st, they're down only 27%. So about a 25% increase. Although they are still down, they are improving. We actually saw even more improvement with Longhorn Steakhouse for the week ending April 12th. They were down about 66%. And now in the week ending June 21st, they're down about 21%. So over a 40% increase in comps there. The company has also said now that it has returned to positive operating cash flow territory, which is good news for them. And a lot of this is due to the fact that restrictions have started to ease. We're seeing restaurants open back up, and a lot of these different restrictions, have changed. Now you can have more parties at a restaurant and all these different things that these names have really benefited from. But of course, they've obviously benefited from this delivery increase, which actually surprises me because I feel like you don't typically associate delivery with these different brands. But they did say that to-go orders were 40% of their total sales with Olive Garden and 28% of their total sales with Longhorn. So we are seeing them dip their toes into this delivery space. And I did check on Uber Eats this morning. You can order Olive Garden, so you can get your breadsticks, maybe not unlimited, but definitely orderable. And that has been a bright spot for them. Not surprising, as we've seen across the board with all these different restaurants, delivery has been key, but I think it's kind of unusual for this name, and I think good for them that they figured out kind of the right recipe here. That kind of brings me to our first tweet, which says, Darden, upcoming earnings should confirm if staying true to their back to the basics operating philosophy has helped them navigate new coronavirus restaurant era. So this basically saying that they have a more traditional, operating method, which I think is totally true. But when you see that 40% of their sales from Olive Garden and 28 are from Longhorn, that's delivery, they're doing something right here, pushing into this space. Which kind of brings me to our next tweet, which says, it's 9 o'clock during the pandemic and Olive Garden in Lafayette, Indiana still has a wait. So again, you cannot beat this demand. I think people really love these names. And it brings me back to my thesis that there are people that admit they love these brands and people that lie. And Kevin, I don't know how often you eat at Olive Garden, but I do know that this demand is something you can't argue. I've driven by some of these names on the highway and they're packed, even in a pandemic.
Yeah, Jenny, we don't call it Olive Garden out here. We call it the OG. That's what we refer to as Olive Garden. But although we don't go to Olive Garden as much, we do go to Capitol Grill in Seasons 52, are two of our mainstays in the rotation of my family's restaurant. And the main road, about a half mile from my house, should be called Darden Restaurant Avenue because 5 Darden restaurants are outside there. And all of them, this is that discussion, though, between small business and corporate restaurants, right? And small businesses are hurting, but the corporate restaurants, which Darden owns several, have that staying power. So this is a name that I think is recovering, and it's going to be a long-term player. Darden restaurants aren't going anywhere, guys.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm a fan of Olive Garden as well. I haven't been there in a long time, but I do admit I like it. Kevin, I love that point you make about the small mom and pop diner versus, these giant corporate restaurants. Hey, I don't know what the staying power is for Darden, but it's certainly got to be more than the smaller mom and pop shops that just really, they couldn't weather this and so many of them closed. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
Right.
Jenny, great information as always, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining us. We say goodbye to Jenny. I want to welcome in Landon Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio.com. Take a look here, Landon, at what LikeFolio is tracking here, because this has been a place, as Jenny pointed out, that people are talking about so many different things throughout the shutdown and the pandemic, as they already were people talking about ordering from these restaurants.
Yeah, so it's I think that Darden definitely has staying power, but unfortunately, I do think they're going to need it. It does not look like a return to normal for restaurants in general, and specifically for Darden, even worse. They're just not getting the same amount of enthusiasm. So during the initial parts of the lockdown, we saw a lot of pent-up demand. People really wanted Olive Garden because they weren't allowed to. And then as to-go orders were introduced and people were able to get that, I think that's sort of satisfied their need. And you can see on this chart, people, took advantage of the to-go orders during the pandemic, but now it's basically returned back to where it was, maybe a slight bump. It was not a change in behavior. And so I think it's really critical that restaurants start to open up for Darden specifically, because people are just not into the to-go as they used to be. And there was a little bit of back and forth on whether or not they would offer delivery. And I think that the CEO made some comments that third-party delivery is sort of an immature business, and they weren't into it. And so there's some conflicting reports on how available it is on third-party delivery. So for the most part, people really want to go to the restaurants. And like Jenny says, it's different if you're sitting down and you have some breadsticks or salad, and then they come back and refill that. That's sort of an experience that people associate with Olive Garden, and you just don't have that on delivery or to-go orders. So we're seeing a little bit of struggle there. But then when you look at the purchase intent of Darden restaurants overall, which includes all of their brands rolled into one, and of course, Olive Garden is the big one. It gets the most mentions by far, over half, and then the other 6 or 7 brands sort of, add up to the rest. You can see a major drop off here in people talking about either getting it delivered, getting the to-go order, or going to the restaurant. And so there's a huge drop off, very concerning. I agree, Kevin, that they're going to be around for a while, and they're not going anywhere. They're going to come back, but according to our data, it's not this quarter. This is not the comeback quarter. And I know that, generally speaking, on a revenue basis, an average quarter is, 2 to 2.3. And they're looking at I think last quarter was 1.3, and now analysts are looking for a small bump up. We're just not seeing it. I think that they could have another poor quarter here. It's really going to come down to valuation, because this company was, in the 30s. And now it's, over 2.5 times up to 90, talking about the bottom of the pandemic, but yet it's still got that prior high of in the 120s before the pandemic. So it's really tough to value where this company's at right now and where they should be. But we know, according to our data at LikeFolio, this is not the comeback quarter for Darden.
Landon, I'm going to use a word here that's doesn't paint a good picture for the restaurant industry, and that's attrition. And you're going to find in some of these restaurant in this sector is attrition is going to take a lot of competitors of Darden out of this business. And sure, over time there'll be more competition and more will reopen. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at your data, the 30-day moving average on purchase intent. And from the beginning of the year, you see obviously this big spike, but it looks like where it has settled is still higher than where it was at the beginning of the year. So their numbers have come back. Am I reading that wrong, or is there some stickiness here that your data is showing? Obviously down off the big highs, but it seems like that number is settling at higher numbers than it was at the beginning of the year, Landon.
If you're talking about the to-go orders, yes, I think it is a very slight bump up. If you're talking about Darden overall, the purchase intent, the chart that's on the screen now, it's definitely lower. We saw them have a lot of trouble around Mother's Day. People wanted delivery. They didn't get the delivery service that they were hoping for. They really struggled on Mother's Day. And I think that may have cost them a little bit of brand loyalty. That'll come back for sure over time. And Kevin, to your point, absolutely. You know, a Italian restaurant by my house that was a mom and pop, open for 15 years, closed down during the pandemic because they just couldn't handle that
Yep.
a long period of time of no revenue coming in. There's going to be a lot of companies, a lot of small restaurants that get out of the way of the behemoths like Darden. And in 2021 or
Right.
2022, that could be really good for Olive Gardens and Longhorn steakhouses. So down the road, I think it's definitely a good thing for Darden, but I just don't see it happening this quarter.
Landon, kind of final thoughts here, because I know that you guys are not only just kind of watching purchase intent for particular brands and products, but you also watch trends. And of course, you talked about the trend of delivery. But my question is to throw you a bit of a curveball here. How much have you seen kind of upticks in people talking about making food at home or buying groceries or using the services like, let's say, a Blue Apron or a Hello Fresh to kind of get those kind of pre-made or pre-packaged ingredient meals and kind of that kind of trend behavior? Because of course that's going to be a long-term, if that sticks, if that is a trend, that's going to hurt these restaurants as well.
Sure. For all the above, massive spike in March and April, and then it started to wane down. I think that people really got into it for a while, and of course, if you stretch out a quarantine for months and months, people are going to get tired of doing that kind of thing. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of skill set change or a little bit of behavior change when it comes to cooking or ordering from a HelloFresh or something like that. But it's what we're seeing is a little bit more towards the return to normal with a bit of a bump up. Similar to the to-go order mentions, which, by the way, we've got just overall getting to-go orders is down 70%. So on a quarter-to-quarter basis, huge spike up, and then it's returning back to normal, similar to what you saw with Olive Garden. And then as the weather gets colder, I think that's what's going to be really interesting. So this quarter that's being reported has had really good weather, and you just don't want to go out when it's cold. You don't want to go driving to pick up your food. You want it delivered, or you want to go to the restaurant. And so I think that the delivery is going to be really important for Darden. They've got to figure that out. They've got to make sure that they're satisfying people if this quarantine continues. If things start to open up, then I'm extremely bullish on Darden. I think that they've knocked some competition out of the way, and then they can just go on to dominate. But right now, what we're seeing with purchase intent is they seem to have lost a lot of enthusiasm from their customers and some of their customer base, which I'm sure will return over time, but not this quarter.